Heading: The Temple of Eternal Slumber. The dense jungle of Zorith Prime was a labyrinth of towering trees, thick vines, and the constant hum of alien wildlife. The air was thick with humidity, and the ground was a treacherous mix of mud and roots. It was here, in the heart of this untamed wilderness, that the Temple of Eternal Slumber stood, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. The temple was a relic of a bygone era, a time when the Azeran Empire ruled the stars with an iron fist. But now, it was nothing more than a forgotten ruin, swallowed by the jungle. Commander Yarrick Voss, a seasoned explorer and former soldier, stood at the edge of the jungle, his eyes fixed on the temple's towering spires. He had spent years searching for this place, following cryptic clues and ancient texts that spoke of a powerful artifact hidden within its walls. The artifact, known as the Heart of Azara, was said to hold the key to unimaginable power. But it was also said to be cursed, guarded by the spirits of those who had died protecting it. Yarrick adjusted the straps of his backpack and checked his equipment. He was not alone on this mission. His team consisted of Dr. Lyra Tanis, a brilliant archaeologist with a deep knowledge of Azeran history, and Kale Draven, a skilled mercenary with a reputation for getting the job done, no matter the cost. Together, they had braved countless dangers to reach this point, and now, the temple was within their grasp. As they approached the temple, the jungle seemed to grow quieter, as if the very air was holding its breath. The temple's massive stone doors were partially open, revealing a dark, foreboding interior. Yarrick signaled for his team to halt and scanned the area for any signs of danger. The temple was ancient, but it was not abandoned. He could feel it in his gut, something was watching them. "Stay sharp," Yarrick whispered, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." Dr. Tanis nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. She had spent her entire career studying the Azeran Empire, and now, she was about to step into one of its most sacred places. Kale, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He had seen enough ancient ruins to last a lifetime, and he was more concerned with the potential payout than the historical significance of the temple. The team moved cautiously through the temple's entrance, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty chamber. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, depicting scenes of Azeran warriors battling strange, otherworldly creatures. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from the beams of their flashlights. As they ventured deeper into the temple, they came across a series of traps, pressure plates, tripwires, and hidden blades. But Jarrek's training and Kale's experience allowed them to navigate the dangers with relative ease. Dr. Tanis, meanwhile, was busy documenting everything, her camera flashing as she captured images of the temple's ancient artwork. Finally, they reached the heart of the temple, a massive chamber dominated by a towering statue of a woman. She was beautiful, with flowing hair and a serene expression, but there was something unsettling about her. Her eyes seemed to follow them as they moved, and her outstretched hand held a glowing crystal, the Heart of Azara. Yarrick approached the statue cautiously, his senses on high alert. He could feel the power radiating from the crystal, and it made his skin crawl. But he also knew that this was what they had come for. The Heart of Azara was the key to unlocking the secrets of the Azeran Empire, and it could change the course of history. As Yarrick reached out to take the crystal, the ground beneath them began to shake. The statue's eyes glowed with an eerie light, and the chamber was filled with a deafening roar. The team barely had time to react as the statue came to life, its stone body cracking and shifting as it transformed into a living, breathing being. The woman, no, the goddess, stepped down from her pedestal, her eyes blazing with fury. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the chamber. Yarrick and his team were frozen in place, their weapons drawn but useless against the sheer power of the being before them. Dr. Tanis was the first to speak, her voice trembling with awe and fear. We mean no harm. We only seek knowledge." The goddess's eyes narrowed as she studied them. "Knowledge," she repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. You seek the heart of Azara, do you not? The power to control the stars themselves? Yarrick swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had faced many dangers in his life, but nothing like this. We seek to understand, he said carefully. To learn from the past so that we may build a better future. The goddess's expression softened, but only slightly. You speak wisely, mortal. But the heart of Azara is not meant for your kind. It is a relic of a time long past, a time when my people ruled the stars. But that time is over, and the heart must remain hidden. Jarrek's heart sank. He had come so far, risked so much, and now it seemed that it was all for nothing. But before he could respond, the goddess's eyes flickered, and she staggered, clutching her head as if in pain. What is happening?" she whispered, her voice filled with confusion and fear. I cannot remember. Dar. Tanis stepped forward, her fear momentarily forgotten. Your memories, they're fading, aren't they? The curse of the heart, it's affecting you too. The goddess looked at her, her eyes wide with realization. Yes, the curse. The heart, it is both a blessing and a curse. It grants immense power, but at a cost. Those who wield it are doomed to forget, to lose themselves. Jarrek's mind raced. If the heart was cursed, then taking it would be a mistake. But if they left it here, it could fall into the wrong hands. He had to make a decision, and fast. Listen to me, he said, stepping closer to the goddess. We can help you. We can find a way to break the curse, to free you from this prison. But we need your help. We need the heart. The goddess looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. You would help me? After all I have done? Yarrick nodded. We all deserve a second chance. Even you. The goddess hesitated, then nodded. Very well. I will give you the heart. But know this, if you fail, the consequences will be dire. The heart's power is not to be taken lightly. With that, she reached out and plucked the crystal from her hand, holding it out to Yarrick. He took it carefully, feeling the weight of its power in his hands. But as he did, the goddess's form began to fade, her body turning to stone once more. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible as she returned to her slumber. And good luck. Yarrick and his team stood in silence, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over them. They had the heart of Azara, but at what cost? And what would they do with it now? As they made their way back through the temple, the jungle seemed to come alive around them, as if the very planet was aware of what they had done. Yarrick couldn't shake the feeling that they had awakened something far greater than they could have imagined. And as they emerged from the jungle, the heart of Azara glowing in his hand, he knew that their journey was far from over. The galaxy would never be the same. Heading: Secrets of the Past. The Starhawk emerged from hyperspace near the ruins of an ancient Azeran outpost. The planet, known as Valor 7, was a barren wasteland, its surface scarred by centuries of war and neglect. But beneath the planet's surface lay the Azeran archives, a vast repository of knowledge that had been lost to time. Yarrick, Dr. Tanis, and Kale suited up and prepared to descend to the planet's surface. The atmosphere was thin, and the air was filled with toxic gases, making it impossible to breathe without protective gear. As they stepped out of the ship, they were greeted by a desolate landscape of crumbling buildings and rusted machinery. The archives should be located in the central complex, Dr. Tanis said, consulting a holographic map on her wrist device. But we'll need to be careful. The outpost was abandoned for a reason. Yarrick nodded and led the way, his plasma blade at the ready. The team moved cautiously through the ruins, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The outpost was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one filled with the remnants of a once great civilization. As they ventured deeper into the complex, they began to encounter signs of life, or rather, signs of something that had once been alive. The walls were covered in strange, pulsating growths, and the air was thick with a sickly sweet smell. Jarek's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but they had come too far to give up now. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a massive room filled with rows of ancient computer terminals and holographic displays. The archives. Dr. Tanis immediately set to work, her fingers flying over the dusty controls as she tried to access the system. "It's still functional," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The Azeran technology, it's incredible. Even after all these years, it's still working." Yarrick and Kale stood guard as Dr. Tanis worked, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. But as the minutes passed, the tension began to grow. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and Yarrick couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Got it," Dr. Tanis said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I've accessed the main database. It's going to take some time to sift through all the information, but I think I can find what we're looking for." Yarrick nodded, but before he could respond, the ground beneath them began to shake. The walls of the chamber groaned as the pulsating growths began to move, twisting and writhing like living creatures. "We need to get out of here," Kale said, his voice tense. "Now." But it was too late. The growths burst open, releasing a swarm of insect-like creatures that filled the air with a deafening buzz. Yarrick and Kale opened fire, their weapons cutting through the swarm, but there were too many of them. "Dr. Tanis, we need to go." Yarrick shouted, but she was already on her feet, clutching a data crystal in her hand. "I've got it," she said, her voice filled with triumph. "I've found the information we need." Yarrick grabbed her arm and pulled her towards the exit, Kale covering their retreat. The swarm followed them, their buzzing growing louder as they closed in. But just as they reached the corridor, the ground gave way beneath them, sending them tumbling into a dark, underground chamber. Yarrick groaned as he picked himself up, his body aching from the fall. The chamber was filled with a strange, blue light, and in the center of the room stood a massive, crystalline structure, a gateway. "What is this place?" Kale asked, his voice filled with awe. Dr. Tanis's eyes widened as she studied the structure. "It's a portal, a gateway to another dimension." The Azerans, they were experimenting with interdimensional travel. Jarek's mind raced. If the Azerans had the technology to travel between dimensions, then the heart of Azara might be more powerful than they had imagined. But before he could say anything, the swarm descended upon them, forcing them to take cover behind the crystalline structure. "We need to activate the portal," Dr. Tanis said, her voice urgent. "It's our only way out." Yarrick hesitated, but he knew she was right. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The portal was their only chance. He grabbed the data crystal from Dr. Tanis and inserted it into a slot on the structure. The portal hummed to life, its light growing brighter as it began to open. "Go!" Yarrick shouted, pushing Dr. Tanis and Kale towards the portal. "I'll hold them off." Kale hesitated, but Dr. Tanis grabbed his arm and pulled him through the portal. Yarrick turned to face the swarm, his plasma blade glowing in the dim light. He knew he couldn't hold them off for long, but he had to try. As the swarm closed in, Yarrick took a deep breath and stepped through the portal, the world around him dissolving into light. Heading: The Price of Power. The journey back to their ship was a blur. Jarek's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. The heart of Azara pulsed in his hand, its light casting eerie shadows on the jungle floor. Dr. Tanis and Kale were silent, their faces pale with shock. None of them had expected to encounter a living goddess, let alone be entrusted with such a powerful artifact. As they reached their ship, the Starhawk, Yarrick quickly secured the heart in a reinforced containment unit. He didn't trust the artifact, not after what the goddess had said about its curse. But he also knew that they couldn't leave it behind. The heart was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. Once they were safely aboard the Starhawk, Yarrick called a meeting in the ship's small briefing room. Dr. Tanis and Kale sat across from him, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and unease. "We need to figure out what to do next," Yarrick said, breaking the silence. "The heart is powerful, but it's also cursed. We can't just hand it over to the highest bidder." Dr. Tanis nodded, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "The curse, it's tied to the heart's power. The goddess said that those who wield it are doomed to forget, to lose themselves. If we're not careful, the same thing could happen to us." Kale leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "So what? We just destroy it? After all we went through to get it?" Yarrick shook his head. "Destroying it might not be an option. The heart is a relic of the Azeran Empire. It could hold the key to understanding their technology, their history. We can't just throw that away." "Then what do you suggest?" Kale asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "We can't keep it, and we can't destroy it. So what's the plan?" Yarrick hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain: they needed help. "We need to find someone who understands the heart, someone who can help us break the curse." Dr. Tanis's eyes lit up. The Azeran archives. They were said to contain the knowledge of the entire empire. If we can find them, we might be able to learn more about the heart and how to control it. Yarrick nodded. "It's a long shot, but it's our best lead. Kale, plot a course for the nearest known Azeran outpost. We'll start there." Kale grumbled but got to work, his fingers flying over the ship's navigation console. The Starhawk hummed to life as it lifted off the ground, leaving the jungle of Zorith Prime behind. As the ship entered hyperspace, Yarrick found himself alone in the cargo hold, staring at the containment unit that held the heart of Azara. The artifact's light pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. "Commander," Dr. Tanis's voice came over the intercom, pulling him out of his thoughts. "You should get some rest. We've got a long journey ahead of us." Yarrick sighed and rubbed his temples. Rest was the last thing on his mind, but he knew she was right. They were going to need all the strength they could get for what lay ahead. Heading, a world beyond. Yarrick emerged from the portal into a world unlike anything he had ever seen. The sky was a swirling mass of colors, and the ground was covered in a strange, crystalline substance that glowed with an inner light. Dr. Tanis and Kale were already there, their faces filled with awe and fear. "Where are we?" Kale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Tanis shook her head. "I don't know, but this place, it's not natural. It's like we've stepped into another reality." Jarrek's mind raced as he tried to make sense of their surroundings. The portal had brought them here, but where was here? And more importantly, how were they going to get back? As they ventured further into the strange landscape, they began to encounter signs of life, strange, alien creatures that seemed to be made of light and energy. The creatures ignored them, going about their business as if they were invisible. "This place, it's like a living organism," Dr. Tanis said, her voice filled with wonder. "Everything is connected, everything is alive." Yarrick nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The creatures might have ignored them, but something else was out there, something dangerous. As they reached the top of a crystalline hill, they saw it, a massive, fortress-like structure in the distance. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, its walls made of a shimmering, translucent material that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "That's where we need to go," Yarrick said, his voice filled with determination. "If there's any chance of finding a way back, it's in there." The team made their way towards the fortress, their footsteps echoing in the strange, alien landscape. As they approached the entrance, they were greeted by a figure, a tall, humanoid being with glowing eyes and a body made of light. "Welcome, travelers," the being said, its voice echoing in their minds. "You have come far, but your journey is not yet over. Yarrick stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. Who are you? What is this place? The being smiled, its expression unreadable. I am the guardian of this realm. And you are the key to unlocking its secrets. Yarrick's heart raced. The guardian's words were cryptic, but he knew one thing for certain, they were in over their heads. But there was no turning back now. They had to see this through, no matter the cost.